Lonely Monk Productions. I don't know if y'all have heard Big by Betty Who yet, but yo.
That's my Jawn! Hey yo, displace the guilt.
What's good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to an all-new episode of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I am your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. Jawn Draper, a.k.a. Don't you know, things will change, things will go your way if you hold Jawn for one more day. If you hold Jawn. AKA Nate 3.0, back at it again with yet another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. On today's episode, I am joined by Nancy Barile, author of the book I'm Not Holding Your Coat, My Bruises and All Memoir of Punk Rock Rebellion. The book focuses on her life and role in the early days of the punk scene in Philadelphia in the early 80s. We talk about that and so much more, and that is coming up in a minute. But first, gang, I am exhausted. What an incredibly busy few weeks I just had. It all started 2 weeks ago when we kicked off the 7-week karaoke contest at Maggie's Waterfront Cafe that I am currently hosting every Thursday night for the next few weeks, which you guys should definitely come check out. We have had some incredible singers swing through, and I'm genuinely excited to see who else comes out next to compete for the $1,000 grand prize. And then, on the next morning, I hit up 88.5's Free at Noon show to catch our pal and former guest Don McCluskey perform a lunchtime set. And y'all, it was incredible. Don and the band sound so goddamn good right now. So if you get the chance to see them live, do not wait to pounce on those tickets. I got home from that, I threw some food in my tummy, and then it was off to New Jersey later that evening to play in a poker tournament that Kevin Smith was throwing at his Smod Castle Podcast Theater. And guys, I made it to the final table because it turns out I'm kind of good at poker. But, all right, I got knocked out by the great Brian O'Halloran who plays Dante in the Clerks film. So, does anyone want to pick up those names I just dropped? Cool. All right, the following Sunday, I played in the Philly Open Disc Golf Tournament, and I shot a terrible score, but hey, as my good buddy Neil Stone always says, fun or else. And guess what? Fun was had. Wednesday, we got to catch the Low Cut Connie show at World Cafe Live. That was part of the Philly Music Fest, and oh my God, that was just an explosion of awesomeness. Not only did Adam and the gang light the stage on fire with a nonstop barrage of pure, unadulterated rock and/or roll, but in the middle of their set, they brought out Rob Hyman, Eric Bazillion, and Dave Osikinen of the Hooters for 3 songs, and it was Philly perfection. Thursday, of course, then was week 2 of the karaoke contest I just told you about. Friday night, we caught Dan Mintz of Bob's Burgers doing some hilarious stand-up down at Punchline. And then, on Saturday, I went down to Citizens Bank Park to watch our 2022 Philadelphia Phillies send those crummy Atlanta Braves packing as we clinched the National League Division Series. Oh my God, yes, that crowd was absolutely electric. Just 100% pure energy on high. So yeah, busy 2 weeks there. But like they said, there is no rest for the wicked, and I owe you guys an episode. So here it is. But let me just throw this out before we get to my interview with Nancy. If you have not already, please jump on the website, www.yothat'smyjawn.com, and sign up for the mailing list. If you're a new kid on the podcast block or you're an old 97 of the show, please do it. It is the best and the easiest way to stay on top of all the goings-on with the Yo, That's My Jawn brand. And of course, you can follow us on all of the socials at Yo, That's My Jawn, and like and subscribe to this show on your favorite podcast app or apps. Do it on all of them. I don't mind. Please and thanks. Okay, after this short ad break, my interview with Nancy Barile. My guest today is a national board certified, award-winning high school English language arts teacher, an adjunct professor, and a writer whose work has been featured in publications such as The Guardian and The Huffington Post, to name a few. But before all of that, she was an integral part of the Philly punk and hardcore scene in the early 80s, not only as the manager of the Sadistic Exploits, but also as a promoter, organizing and launching the legendary Punk Fests 1 and 2. All of which she has expertly detailed in her book, I'm Not Holding Your Coat, My Bruises and All Memoir of Punk Rock Rebellion, which brilliantly tells the story of punk's early days in the city of brotherly love and her role in it. Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show, Nancy Barile. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Nancy Barile. Nancy, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So just to give everybody just a little background on how we got connected, we're both in a Facebook group entitled Vintage Philadelphia. And that's how I first saw one of your posts about the scene back in the day. And like just reading it, I was just completely enthralled. And I had wanted to reach out to talk to you on this podcast even before I knew you had written a book. And once I read the book, then it was like lights out. Like I love your wealth of knowledge, and I love just how much a part of the scene you were, and I cannot wait to pick your brain.
Oh, that's so awesome. And I'll tell you, that Vintage Philadelphia site has brought more cool people into my life than any single website, Facebook group ever in my life. It's unbelievable, the people that I've met through that group. It's really cool.
It's so cool. And, I'm literally just like, I'm a simple person. I'm literally just there for old pictures because I love old pictures. Like, hey, I know where that is, But yeah, finding you was like finding an absolute treasure because, like I said, I've now completed your book. I'm going to hold it up even though no one can see this because it's an audio podcast, but I'm not holding your coat. Well, I am holding your book and it is fantastic. So, just let's let these people find out a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up.
Okay, so I grew up in East Norton, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, maybe about 25, 30 minutes outside of Philadelphia. Really, Leave It to Beaver type suburban existence. I went to Catholic school from 1st to 12th grade. My dad was a Marine, so he was really strict. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until I was in high school. I have an older sister and a younger brother. And, it was, compared to what I actually see in my own high school where I teach and, other people's experience, it was really quite idyllic. I really don't have anything to complain about.
Sure. The, early on, what kind of music was playing around your house? Like, what were your folks listening to?
So, of course, we had a record player, one of those little ones. And, I remember things like Tommy James and the Shondells, Dave Clark 5, the Beatles, the Stones, Fats Domino, Chubby Checker, things like that. And we listened to a lot of AM radio. AM radio was a little different than it is now. Like they played a variety of music, and I would hear things like, House of the Rising Sun and even at I was probably like 5 years old when I heard that song for the first time. And I think that was when I really first realized, there's something a little dangerous about music, watching Ed Sullivan on the Sunday nights and seeing the Beatles and then seeing the Rolling Stones, and, making that calculus in my, 8-year-old mind, like, there's something a little different between these two groups here, and definitely I tended to gravitate to the more dangerous, eviler side of music. And I loved music, and jukeboxes were huge back in my day. And I didn't realize that until I wrote the book. And I realized how much musical knowledge I got from listening to jukeboxes, because they were everywhere. Like if you went in a sandwich shop, they were in the sandwich shop. Even in my high school, we had a jukebox in the cafeteria. We belonged to a swim club, and that was huge. We would just sit there and play music and then dance in this like dance area. And it was great. It was a great introduction to music. And it was sort of, as I say in my book, you would pick your songs and plant your flag and say, like, this is what I'm into. And then you wait and see what somebody else played. And you're like, oh, you like Led Zeppelin Trampled Underfoot too? So do I. You like Lola by the Kinks? So do I. So it was really kind of cool.
Yeah, jukeboxes are one of my, it should come as no surprise that I ended up DJing for a while, but jukeboxes were always like my thing. It was like, okay, I'm going to play this song, exactly like you said, I'm going to play this song and I'm going to look around and I'm going to find my new friend because they're going to, I'm going to, and then also like, I want the credit of like, yes, I played this. This was me.
Yeah, that was me. I played that. Right. Exactly. And it, it told people who you were. And it was really a cool way to meet people.
It really was. So, you talk about House of the Rising Sun and, the Stones on Ed Sullivan. What was kind of the first music you came across that you kind of found as your own?
Growing up, my sister was 2 years older than me. And so, I listened to a wide variety of music. Dave Clark 5, as I said, Tommy James and the Shondells. I liked a lot of the British invasion stuff, stuff that I saw on Ed Sullivan. But when my sister, we used to share a bedroom, and she moved downstairs to the basement to get away from me, and get some privacy as a teenager. And she bought a stereo, and she would play records. And I would hear them through the floorboards, and fall in love with the music. And so when she went to work, I'd go downstairs, and, I had to be very, stealthy because she would kill me. And I would, play the records to find out what was it that I was listening to, because I had no way to identify, So I would go through them all, and I'd be like, oh yeah, T-Rex, Mott the Hoople, David Bowie. I like this, Foghat, Jay Giles, not so much, And so I would say really the person that I got extremely passionate, probably my freshman year of high school, age 14, was David Bowie. That was really my gateway into music. I just loved Bowie and still love Bowie and still have enormous respect for Bowie and wow, there's nobody like him. So that I would say Bowie was really the first.
That is so I everybody on the podcast who listens to this already knows this. I've said it probably 10 million times, and I will say it 10 million and one. But my first two concerts were David Bowie on the Serious Moonlight tour, and my second one was David Bowie on the Glass Spider tour.
That's awesome.
And like Bowie has always been kind of like my North Star of like a creative, like he is without a doubt like the pinnacle of creativity. Have you gotten to see Moon Age Daydream yet?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I've read all the reviews and I listened to my friends, and I really wanted to see it in IMAX, but I missed it. And, we used to have a movie theater right in my hometown, and they tore it down and built an Amazon fulfillment center.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah, much to my chagrin. And so for me to get to the movies, it's kind of it's not easy anymore, And so I don't know if I'm going to have to wait and see it on my big TV back there on HBO Max when it comes out in November or what, but I'm really dying to see it. I've heard all different things about it, the good, the bad, the ugly, but it's Bowie, so I'm gonna love it no matter what, Yeah,
100%. I haven't seen it yet, but I've been ingesting the soundtrack like crazy, because some of those alternate takes and stuff on there, like it's just a well produced soundtrack, and I'm really excited for that. So Bowie was kind of your first thing. What was the main draw? Like what about it was it?
Bowie was so different. And I can just remember like staring at the album covers, like of pinups or Diamond Dogs. There was nothing like that out there. That was, to my little suburban Catholic schoolgirl self, that was just the wildest thing. And the music was so different and incredible than anything that I ever heard before, where you could just listen to every song back to back and they were all good. You just never got tired of it. So I loved his entire persona, his talent. I loved his band. I'm a huge Mick Ronson fan. He's probably one of my favorite guitarists. And Bowie just had everything going on. I can remember, begging my mom to watch the 1980 Floor Show, which was on like the midnight special. And if you get a chance, YouTube that, because it is just spectacular. And even though I know my mom was kind of like, this is weird. This is, is he a boy or a girl, kind of thing. I know that after she watched that with me, that she was a fan of Bowie, and she was, until she died. She always liked Bowie and Brian Ferry. Those were her two favorites. So it was just, there was just nobody like Bowie out there, and it was really eye-opening for somebody like me. It was an introduction to this whole new world.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. One of the other stories that you tell in the book from earlier in life that absolutely floored me was the story about meeting Patti Smith's mother.
Oh, my God. Yeah. That was...
Yeah, please tell them this story, because it's absolutely phenomenal.
So I hung around with some older gay men who went to my high school. They were seniors, and I was probably like a freshman or sophomore. And they introduced me to a whole new world as well. And so we went to see Patti Smith. And these were in the days where you could go to 18th and Lombard and camp out for tickets and get the front row. They didn't go to the suits. They didn't go to corporate. They went to the kids. And that was so great. And so we camped out and we got front row for Patti Smith tickets. And the night of the show, we were walking down the aisle. And in about the 11th row, we saw an older couple. And my friend Pete said, I bet that's Patti Smith's parents, and I was a shy, kid, but he was like, I'm going to go ask him. I was like, yeah, let's go do it. So we went over and he said, are you Patti Smith's parents? And they said, yes, we are. We were just blown away by that. And I started talking to Beverly, and she was so kind, and she ran the fan club, and we exchanged addresses, and we wrote for many years. And she was just the nicest person. I can remember like telling her about school and all this stuff. And she always remembered and wrote back accordingly. And it was, she sent me pictures, autographed pictures of the band. And, I saved those letters, and I thought I had lost them. But after my father died, my brother inherited the house and where I grew up, and he found them. And I was like, oh my God, this is so great to have these letters, that from, the mother that were and they were long on this yellow legal paper, like pages and pages that she wrote to me. It was really sweet. And I thought Patti was great because there weren't a lot of female rockers. And so having somebody like Patti out there, if Patti was reading a book, if she was reading Rimbaud, or she was, reading William Burroughs, then I ran out and I read so again, more introduction to a world outside of suburbia.
Yeah, she was just at the Exponential Music Festival, and it was the day that we were traveling back from Cape Cod, so we missed it. But man, I mean, like still going strong, still sounds great, still creating incredible, art and stuff like that. Like what a talent.
I've seen her twice now when she's done like just a spoken word tour where she talks and somebody interviews her. And I even brought my students once, and they thought she was fabulous. She talks a little, then she comes out and she plays. Just an unbelievable human being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you go away to college, Central Penn, correct?
Correct. Yes. And right outside of Harrisburg.
And, it's one of those things that, I like to talk to people, especially from the Philadelphia area, about is how much of that decision was to get away from home but still be close enough just in case.
Yeah, well, my father made all the decisions I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher since I went to school and kindergarten, first grade, I would play school with all the neighborhood kids. I was always the teacher, and I really wanted to be a teacher. And my father said, no, you won't make any money. It's dangerous. It's not safe for you to do that. It's not a good thing. And he really wanted me to go into law. And so I had heard about paralegal. That was a new field at the time. And I said, okay, well, how about I be a paralegal? You go to school for 2 years, you get an associate's degree. And he said, yeah, that's cool. And that was right in Harrisburg. So it was perfect. It was, 2 hours away, and off I went and had my freedom, which was really cool.
Yeah, I went to IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which and I always said the decision was that I knew I was never going to get like a surprise visit, but also I knew that if anything were to happen, they could get there,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think you said you had an old classmate that you ended up rooming with there.
Right. Yeah. So there was a girl that I went from 1st to 12th grade with. Her name was Dee. And, we were friendly, but we weren't, best friends or anything like that. But when we realized that we were both going to the same school, we said, hey, do you want a room together? Just in case, you could get somebody crazy. So we agreed to do that. And she ended up being a lifelong friend, really great person. And where we were was a very small, quiet town. And we realized very quickly, if we were going to have any fun, we were going to have to make our own fun. And so this was the height of the disco era. And I was also, it was 1977 when I graduated high school and went off to school. But I was also really into punk rock. And we would walk down to the major shopping center and I would buy Punk magazine off the rack. And I got a punk rock pen pal from them and stuff. But we would go to discos and we would go to, we would try to find rock shows to go to. And we really, the 2 years that I was there, I had a great time. I met some fabulous people that I still keep in touch with. And so it was really a good experience. It wasn't the career that I wanted, but it was definitely a great experience in learning how to orchestrate your own good time when you needed to. So, because there wasn't much going on around there. So.
Sure. And it's funny, knowing how things end up and all, just like how many kind of foundational tenets that you've used from different, from these different things. So the ability to kind of create your own good time. It's just, it's like it was all meant to be, like it all was putting you in that path.
Right. And I agree 100% with that, and, as you read in the book, 3 Mile Island happened when I was there. And I was sneaking down to see Roxy Music on a Friday night, and my parents didn't know where I was and they wanted me to evacuate. And it was this, they were calling me and they couldn't get in touch. And then finally they called my best friend from East Norton and said, if you know where she is, you have to tell us. And so, when I get off the train and go to the Tower Theater, my best friend's like, you got to call your mother, she's freaking out. And I was like, oh God, I'm so dead, And so I call the house just begging that my mom answers the phone and not my dad. But of course my dad answered, and I was with a guy, and he wasn't a boyfriend or anything. But when my dad told me, he was like, you got to come home right away. This is like a nuclear meltdown and it's really dangerous. Well, then I was like, I didn't want to leave my friend to go back to the nuclear meltdown. So I said, well, I'm with a friend, Dad. He's like, bring him with you. So he was really cool about it when it came. My dad in a clutch could be really cool. And bailed me out on that. And, but we were worried about grades and papers that we had due and stuff. So we went back up, and then school got closed down. And my little brother, who had just gotten his license, he was like 16. My dad sent him and said, go get your sister. And, he's so scared, on the turnpike and highways and stuff. It barely even knew how to drive. We were all terrified, but, he got me home safely.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You mentioning the Roxy Music Show. One of the other things that I learned in the Vintage Philadelphia group, and then it comes up in the book as well. You kept extensive notes of the live shows you went to. When did that start?
So I started doing it right away. And the thing that makes me angry is that I stopped after like 70. And I think that's after I went to college and I just got too busy. I also wish, I wrote down the shows and who opened, but I didn't write down where they were or the dates, which I wish I was a little smarter with that. But I'm really psyched to have that list because it's my biography, it's my trip down memory lane when I look and I say, oh my God, I saw this band and this band and this band. And, sometimes there are bands on there that did I see that band? I don't even remember, but then there's the ones that are like, oh, that was a transformative, life-changing experience when I saw that show. So, my first show was Rod Stewart and just amazing. And then Alice Cooper. And so I saw some really, you often laugh when you see that T-shirt that says, I may be old, but I saw all the good bands. I feel that way. I feel that is the truth.
You definitely did.
And it's a boomer thing to say. I know it's a boomer thing to say, like, oh, our music was so good, but our music was so great at that time. It really, really was. When you look at all the bands that came out in the 70s into the 80s, oh my God, such great art. It was really just amazing.
Definitely. It's like my favorite period of music. Like
I agree.
It's just there because, there was so much inventive stuff happening, but also so it was such a potpourri of ideas. Like, the idea today, if you were to say something is punk to somebody compared to back in the day, like what punk was and how the Ramones didn't sound like the Clash, and there was variety and just it was more an ethos than it was kind of a sound.
It absolutely was, and I remember there were bands like Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers that I hated back in the day. Like if that came on and I was at a party, I was like, get this off, But then maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I watched one of those like Behind the Music or some documentary about Leonard Skinner. And I was like listening to that stuff and I was like, oh man, there's that guitar solo in oh my God, in Freebird. I got right on YouTube and watched that. And I was like, that's got to be one of the greatest guitar solos of all time, if not the greatest guitar solo of all time. And I'm telling you, if you put that on around me when I was a kid, I would have smashed it probably. But I have such an appreciation for so much of that music now that I didn't back then. Even disco, right? And I liked disco back in the day. Because I like to dance. That was my thing. I like to dance. But sometimes I put on Sylvester, Mighty Real one time in my classroom and, just in between changing classes, and my kids came in and my kids were like, what is this, Barile? This is awesome. It's great. It's really great, from the funk of the Ohio Players. Oh, come on. We could go on and on. So.
It's amazing. So out of school, you end up in Philly, in the scene, tell me a little bit about what you remember about Philadelphia during that time.
So Philadelphia at that time was a dangerous place. There was a lot of crime, blight, police corruption. But I was just thrilled with it all. I was just so happy to be in the epicenter. And so at first I was, I had an apartment right at 12th and Chestnut, but I was scared to go out at night by myself because I didn't really have any friends down there yet. So sometimes my friends would come down and we would go out, or we would go to Emerald City to see bands in Cherry Hill. But it wasn't until I ran into a friend that I made in Harrisburg, Bob, I just ran into him on the street in Philly. He was like, "Oh my God, Nancy Petrillo." And then he was like, "Let's go to the Hot Club." And then we started going to the Hot Club together because then I had somebody to go with. And after that, then I met a lot of people, and I was there every night practically, seeing bands like Madness and the B-52s and a lot of cool local bands, and just really, really having the time of my life. When I look back now, I'm so old now and I have no energy to do anything without like months of planning. And I just think like we were out every night of the week seeing live music, or, it was just so much fun. Philly was just a hotbed of creativity in everything, in art, in fashion, in music, in culture, just everything. It was really just, it was dangerous, it was scary, but it was just booming with excitement.
Yeah, yeah. You paint such a beautiful picture of the city, even through the danger and the blight, as you mentioned, like of just what a community of punk friends existed. Like that entire scene just seems like something almost out of a movie, like out of make believe, because like it just doesn't really exist anymore, like that kind of specific subculture.
It was really, really fun. And the crazy thing is I keep in touch with all those people still to this day. When I had my book event in Philly, a guy named Joe Hardcore did it at the church in 21st and Chestnut Street. And I didn't really know Joe. My husband introduced me to him, and he was like, "Oh, like you're the legacy of what I'm doing now, So he was really cool. And he gave me this great space to do it in, and 210 people came out. I never dreamed of anything like that. And I can remember, and I almost start crying telling you this. I remember walking home with my brother and saying to him, I could drop dead right now and like be the happiest person in the world. Because Philly, man, that's my heart. It really, really is. And I hope to, move back after I retire in 2 years. And everyone's like, "Oh, it's dangerous. It's crazy down there." And I'm just like, please, I want to go back.
You're like, I remember that. Yeah, that's what it was.
And that's, my brother said, "Well, yeah, you were young then and you can't run as fast as you could run back then."
It's funny. It cleaned up and you left and you're like, it's getting bad again. Time to come back.
Right. So I've got 2 years. I've got this year and next year to teach. And then I think I'm going to be done. And then I have to just convince my Boston bred husband that this is where we want to be.
I love it. I love it. Well, one of the things that also I didn't count how many times, but I know at least 3 times I saw a reference to Jim's Steaks. Have you heard about what happened to Jim's?
I did hear about Jim's Steaks, and I was, watching it in real time because I'm friends with Ezekiel Zagar, whose father is Isaiah Zagar, the artist, and his family owns the shop right next door, the art gallery there. And I actually, if you can see it, I actually bought one of his, see that mosaic back there?
Yeah.
I bought that mosaic to help support them in, in their rebuild so that they could, I hope that they can open soon. And that was just, that was devastating, loss to the city. There's a great video that someone sent me, with a bunch of people in Jim's Steaks, all in line, probably like right, after the clubs let out, and people should YouTube this. People listening should YouTube this. Boys to Men comes on the end of the road, and everybody in the place just starts singing it. It's such a great Philly moment. That, I think the first time I saw it, I'm a crier, but the first time I saw it, I think I just burst into tears because it was just such a Philadelphia moment. Everybody just singing a Boyz II Men song, right? It was great.
Oh, it's so beautiful, and at the most perfect place too. Like Jim's of the 3, Jim's is my favorite.
Always my favorite. Yeah, I don't even think I've ever been to the other ones. I don't think I've ever been to Pat's, and And people tell me there's one in Roxborough that's really good.
D'Alessandro's is my favorite, but I don't really count it because it's to me it's just outside the city.
Okay, yeah, okay, all right. So that's but I hear a lot of good things about that. But that I don't know if I think it existed, but we weren't going to Roxborough
it was in the wrong direction.
Right there, that was close to us.
So, that kind of brings me to one of the things like around that time period. Now I was a small child, but my parents used to bring me down to the city all the time. And one of the things that was a beacon to me and I was always drawn to was South Street. I just absolutely loved South Street, but specifically and RIP, not there anymore, but I loved Zipperhead. I just thought it was the coolest store in the world. And it's funny to me that in my mind, it existed forever. But really, when I was down there, maybe 10 years,
Yeah. For me, there were places like Skins and Rosebud, and then of course the TLA and Jim Steaks, and so that was that was a fun area. But I remember when Zipperhead opened, and as punks initially we were like, "Oh, this is corporate punk," we don't, we don't really want to, support somebody taking our subculture and merchandising it, So in the beginning, I can remember, that we wouldn't go there. We went to the other stores, but not so much Zipperhead. Is it still there or is it gone?
No, it's gone, though they left one of the ants. Lives on a building somewhere, but not in the actual location. It's somewhere else. But
right. Oh, that's too bad that it's gone because that was a great place.
Yeah, South Street got weird because much like everything, once it was mined for once there was a gap on South Street, it was just I knew it was kind of all. It's coming back though. It's coming.
Yeah, back. Right.
But that Tower Records being gone is still just a dagger in my heart because I used to.
Yeah, that wasn't there when I lived there. There was a book trader that had I think they sold books and records, and I think that was it for record stores when I was there. I can't really remember. We just went to 3rd Street Jazz and Rock. That was where we bought all our records. That was the spot. So, but Tower definitely wasn't there when I left in 82. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that was pretty early on. But yeah, I want to see it. I saw a place I'm following on Instagram called Crash Boom Philly. Do you know that?
It sounds familiar, but
yeah, that looks like a really cool spot, and I think that might be on South Street. And I follow them on Instagram, and they post some cool things that they're doing and stuff that they have in their store. And so I always thought when I go back, I want to go in there and check it out and see.
Yeah, there's still some great places.
Wave, yeah.
Yeah. So, at some point you end up becoming the essentially the manager for Sadistic Exploits. How, I guess you were kind of destined to at some point not be just a fan of music, but was it something you were looking for, or do you think you just kind of happened into that?
I think I was raised to always kind of be a contributor. Like if you were going to be part of something, then you had to contribute. I was a Girl Scout. I was a cheerleader. You had to have this team effort. And I had no talent, zero talent. I couldn't play an instrument. I couldn't sing. And here was this band of great guys that wanted to make music, and I wanted to be a part of it, And so when they asked me to be manager, I just was thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be a part of it. And they treated me so great. They always put me in the pictures and everything. And so it was really fun. And we were finding our way doing shows and, renting the Elk Center and doing all ages shows and going up to New York to CBGB's for the first time. It was just so much fun to have those guys as my tribe. I felt very lucky. And that was a thing about Philadelphia that sometimes people talk a lot about. And I mentioned this in the book too. In some areas, women were not as welcomed. And as they were. But in Philadelphia, women ran everything. Allison Schnackenberg, she was a photographer. She wrote a fanzine. She did shows, and guys did shows too. But Ginny Trainor, women were really, they were in the bands. They were really part of the scene, and everybody was really accepting. And so for me, it was, I got a great deal of empowerment from punk rock and hardcore because, I was doing things that I was out of my comfort zone doing these big shows and stage diving and slam dancing and, running the streets of New York and just having a really, really good time. When I look back now and think about it, everybody looks at things through rose-colored glasses as they do. But when I was writing the book, there were some things I was like, people are never going to believe any of this happened because some of it is so crazy, the bombs and the riots and stuff. But then I also was saying, wow, I'm so lucky to have come up this way. And it's helped me so much in my career. I would not be the teacher that I am today if I did not come up that way.
Yeah. You mentioned the bombs and the riots, and that was one question I had after reading the book, and that is, why continue to book shows at the Starlight?
Yeah, see, I didn't book those shows. So that was David Carroll, and David Carroll ran the Hot Club. And so the first couple of shows that he did, Susie and the Banshees, I think Cheetah Chrome, the Circle Jerks, there was a little bit of tension, but things were bad everywhere. So you kind of expected that. It wasn't until the SOA Black Flag show where things got really scary and bad. And I didn't go back for a year. It was a solid year. But then the Dead Kennedys were playing. I had to go see the Dead Kennedys, and then that's the show they threw the bomb at us. And then I made a vow, I will never go back to Kensington. And that is a promise that I have kept.
Yeah, well, that's a good promise to keep because, I was like dumbfounded because, like I said, when I'm younger, all of this kind of stuff seems like ages ago, but now that I'm older and I look at years, I'm like, oh, that was like 3 years before I was going to shows. Like that was, right. And I, growing up, I had always heard, oh, I can't believe you go to so many shows. It's dangerous down there. But like, it was never dangerous to me. Like I knew where I was safe, essentially. Like I knew dangerous places and I had been to dangerous places, my mom was an addict. And so I used to go down with her, a lot of times to really dangerous places. So like I kind of knew the city, but I never knew just like the show danger, it blew my mind, to be honest.
And we were sort of jaded from it. You, any show that you went to, you took your chances. And I just kind of remember when we booked the Camden show, when I look back now, I'm thinking, Camden, really? We really booked a show in Camden? Like, we knew Camden was dangerous, but everywhere was dangerous. And so we were just happy to find a venue that was close to Philly that you could get to by public transportation. Hindsight's 2020. And so I don't know. Like, I just think that we just got kind of desensitized to it. And, looking back now, I think, oh my God. And somebody was reading the book. One of the people that interviewed me for a fanzine was reading the book, and she said she just kept screaming, "Stop going to Kensington! Will you stop going to Kensington?"
Seriously, like I was completely dumbfounded when you went back for the Dead Kennedy show because I was just I was like, you know what happened.
I know, especially because the night before in Staten Island was a riot, so why go back? But yeah, we did.
Yeah. So here's a question I love to ask. Who from that time period and from Philly, it doesn't even have to definitely be from Philly, but like name a band that you remember from back then that you kind of think is just completely unsung, that like didn't get kind of the, Minor Threat Black Flag kind of, Dead Kennedys notoriety, but should have, like, was up there in your eyes?
That was up there in my eyes. I mean, I was a huge Bad Brains fan, but I do believe that they have their, they're pretty iconic and considered pretty great. The only bands that I can think of that I think were kind of unsung, but they were in Britain, were bands like Crisis and Flux of Pink Indians, who you probably never heard of. But they were bands that I really liked. And perhaps they were huge in England, but I wanted them to come here and play. And I never got to see those bands play. So maybe those bands, I really can't think of most of the bands. They hold such high esteem in my own brain that it's hard for me to say, a band like TSOL, who I think were incredible. And then you had bands like, The Offspring come around and kind of somewhat do what they did. I kind of think they were kind of unsung because I loved their records. I thought their records were really great. I think Bad Religion takes, they sort of get a bad rap sometimes, but man, there was nothing like that first record that they came out with. I thought was incredible. I still listen to it. So, in my own head, the hierarchy is a little different probably than the real world.
Sure. I was excited to see. There's a gentleman who, for over a year now, we've been going back and forth. I've been trying to get him on this show, but and it keeps falling through every single time we set something up. It falls through, and I literally just ran into him at CVS. But I was glad to see Chuck Treese mentioned in the book.
Chuck is great. Yeah, Chuck is great. Now Chuck was a little kid when I knew him, a little kid and a great skateboarder. That's good, decent, solid beginning musician, but, just kind of coming up. And I left before, he really became the icon that he became. But we reconnected over social media. And at one point I got a grant at my school to do a rock ensemble. But we needed instruments and things like that to make it work. And Chuck gave us all kinds of stuff. It was really cool that, he reached out and we just had so much stuff from him that I had to say, okay, we have enough stuff now from people. So it was really, and people from all over Philly did the same thing. It was, it was really nice. And that's one thing, I teach in a high poverty school. And so if I want anything like extra, I have to do crowdsourcing, which, really kind of stinks for teachers that we have to do that. But who funds all my stuff? Punk rock people, field trips, guest speakers, books, resources. I can put something up and 22 minutes later, some $500 project is funded by punk rock people and my former, high school classmates, it's really, and former students. It's really heartwarming.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And it kind of lends to the DIY nature that you're so experienced with. So when you made, the move to Boston and the pivot to becoming a teacher, how satisfying was it to finally actually realize what you wanted to do in the first place?
Oh, it was terrifying. I have to tell you, living through bombs and riots and stuff, standing in front of your first classroom of teenagers is far more terrifying than any of that. I was really, really scared. Excuse me. But I was so excited to be doing, the work that I wanted to do for so long. And I love teaching and it was, it's been a very good career for me for 29 years now. And next year I'll retire after 30. So, but it was great. And so much, again, of what I did in punk rock, I used in my career. my first year of teaching, there was a lot of Cambodian gangs in my school, and I had no cultural competency at all. I went to private school, mostly white school. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but the kids taught me as much as I taught them. They really, really did. And one of my students was shot and killed my first year of teaching. And it was really devastating. And I kind of vowed that I was going to do whatever I could to help these kids. And so I was doing like a lot of gang outreach and stuff. And I remember, the kids saying to me, like, aren't you scared, being out here with us, like, aren't you scared? And then recently, one of the gang kids read my book, and he wrote me a letter, and he said, now I know why you weren't scared. Because that's
awesome. That is so awesome. Well, not that the music stuff wasn't amazing, but like the teacher bona fides and the awards you've won are absolutely astounding and incredible. Like, but there is one in particular I need to ask you about. And
I'm sorry, I have a cold.
No worries. But the Boston Red Sox Most Valuable Educator Award. When you won that, did you wear a Phil's hat? Because
no, so the Phillies never asked me to come on there, but the Red Sox did. Okay. And so I was going to, I wore a Red Sox shirt when I went out there, and I still keep my Philly sports affiliation, but I've grown to love a lot of the teams in Boston as well. When I moved to Boston, I lived right next door to Fenway Park. Like, I'm talking, I could throw a baseball and it would hit the field. That's how close I lived there. And it was so bizarre to me that there was a baseball field in the middle of this neighborhood. It was crazy. And we used to have the schedule in the car so that I knew if I could get home or not, because if a game was letting out, I'd have to, we'd have to drive around until we could, get home and get a parking space. But I remember the first game that I went to, a girl from my job said, come on, I got bleacher seats. We're going to go see the Red Sox. And I was like, all right, let's go, So we go there and we're sitting $4 seats in the bleachers. And I'm telling you, the Red Sox fans are going insane. They're jumping over the wall. They're screaming. They're yelling. I'm like, I'd never been to a baseball game before. Not even, I think I went to a Phillies game maybe when I was like a little tiny kid, but I didn't really remember it. But I had never been to a baseball game. And I was like, I can't believe how crazy these people are. So I go home and I say to my husband, like, and the Red Sox won. And I said, wow, I can't believe what maniacs these Boston Red Sox fans are. And he says to me, I can't believe you were at the game where Roger Clemens just pitched 20 strikeouts.
Oh my goodness.
And so here I was at this historic game, and I was clueless, I had no idea. And so he said, save that ticket stub. That's going to be worth a lot of money. And so I saved it. And just last year on the anniversary date, I posted it on my Instagram, and both Roger Clemens and his wife, liked it and commented on it. So
that's incredible.
Funny. Yeah, it was really funny. But that was like my first game, and who knew? I had no idea that I was at this historic game that he did this great thing. But
that's so incredible. So so you're teaching, and then somehow a student gets a hold of a photo, and you're outed as having this punk history. Was there any fear behind that, or were you?
Yeah, there was a lot of fear behind that, because I was afraid that my punk rock past would not play well with parents and administrators, and so I was a little scared about that. And my husband was in another band, he was in SD Control. And then in the late 90s, he started a band called Gauge. And they were really popular in the Boston area. And a lot of my students would go to shows, and I would be so scared that, they would get hurt or something would happen, and then I would get fired. And so I kept everything a secret, as much as I could, until the internet became what it is. And then that kid in my advanced placement class came in and was like, this is you. And I was like, so, I had to make a quick decision. Do I confirm, deny? What do I say? And I just told them, I was like, yeah, that's me. And, that was one of the best days of my life. I had so much fun. And then they barraged me with questions and stuff. There aren't a lot of kids at my school who like punk rock. They mostly like hip hop or world music and, things like that. But it's always cool when I do meet one that does like punk rock. Funny story. I had a kid that graduated in like maybe 1999. And he was the only kid in the school who liked hardcore, and he knew his hardcore. He knew his stuff really well. And he was never in any of my classes, but he would come to my room and he would ask me endless questions about a hardcore. Did the hardcore kids like Michael Jackson? What about the hardcore kids do this? Just to barrage me with questions. And he was really cool. So when he graduated, I wanted to do something nice for him and give him a present. So I had 2 test pressings here. I had a minor threat out of step test pressing that Ian gave me when he stayed at my house when they played Boston. And I had an SSD get it away test pressing. And I said, all right, I'm going to give him to this. And so I gave him to him as a present. Imagine that, never dreaming what those records would be worth in 15 years.
My Lord.
And so, and my husband had a fit. He was like, that wasn't yours to give away, my get it away test pressing. And I was like, went to Bobby. And so then maybe like 5 years ago, Bobby called me and he said, my wife and I are having a baby, and I think it's time to sell these records, and I said, okay, I can help you do that. And he said, if you help me do it, I'll give you half the money. And so I said, okay. And so I put it up on, Instagram and Facebook. And within 20 minutes, both sold for ridiculous money. And so I gave Bobby his money and I took my money and put it into a fund to take my kids to New York City on a field trip. And so I think that, both Al and Ian would be very happy with where, what the outcome of the sale of those records. But yeah, I wasn't my smartest decision.
Wow. Well, it ended well. It ended well.
Yeah, it ended very well with a good story anyway. I love the stories. I always got to have a story.
And you're a great storyteller. So like was kind of a early memoir like this ever in the plans before being outed as a punk rocker by your student, or was that kind of like something that spurred the emotion and the memories to kind of capture that?
I think that I always wanted to write a book. That was a dream since I was 8th grade, 8 years old. But I always thought maybe I would write a fiction, a novel or something like that. So I didn't really think about writing the book until the internet came out. And there was a guy named Reverend Hank Pierce, and he asked me one time, does your punk rock past influence your teaching? And when I sat down and I wrote this article, I realized it was everything to my teaching, really, and so I wrote this article and it came out really good. So I submitted it to Education Week, which is like the big teacher magazine. And it went kind of viral, over 100,000 likes, and Harvard University shared it and all these people. And so then I think that's when I realized that I had something that, and I liked to tell stories. And I often told stories in the Facebook groups like I did in Vintage Philadelphia. And when I would do it in the hardcore and punk groups, invariably there would always be some man born in 1990 who would try to correct me or contradict me or refute what I was saying. And it would make me so angry that I just said, you know what, I'm going to write a book and put it all out there, and then they can come at me because this is what I lived. And you're not going to tell me that it didn't happen or that I'm wrong about something when I was there. And, that's what I did. And so, the first, when I first wrote the book, it was how punk rock made me a better teacher. And it was the punk rock piece and then the teaching piece all in one book. And I got a really high powered agent right away. And he said, oh, we're going to send this out to auction. And I was like, well, I'm going to be able to quit my job. It's going to be great. And then, what happened was people either liked the punk rock story or they liked the teacher story, but they didn't like both together. And so, so it was very easy for me to peel off the the punk rock, it was finite. It ended in 1982. And so I went with that, first and was lucky enough to get Bazillion Points as a publisher. They took a chance on me because, I'm a nobody, right? I wasn't in a band. I wasn't, a big agent or anything. So I'm forever grateful to Ian at Bazillion Points for, putting out the book.
Oh, me too, because it's like I said, it's a phenomenal read, and I implore everybody listening to pick up a copy.
It really means the world to me to hear that.
The other half, the teaching half, is there any plan on releasing that?
So the thing about that one is I just worry about what they call like virtue signaling when I tell stories in there, that I want to be like, my students have wide variety of backgrounds. And I almost feel like they're great stories. They're really cool stories, and my students impacted my life in profound ways. But I don't want to be exploitive, and so I don't know that I'll ever publish that. I don't know if I have another book, maybe something else in me or whatever. But I'm just so happy with this one that I don't even feel like I need to, this book has exceeded all my expectations. If you would have told me that, that I would sell this many books and that people would read it and love it, and I'd be on podcast, I'd be like, get out of here. So I figured, a couple of relatives, couple of friends, some diehard punk rockers. Right. And, it's been great. And the pandemic helped me, because people were reading a lot during the pandemic. And so that really did help me a lot. And I appreciate that. So it was a timing issue as well, too, I think.
Sure. So I have an idea. If there isn't another book, I have an idea for you, and I don't even know who to tell this to, but somebody listening that owns a record label should get you to curate a compilation of early 80s Philly punk rock, punk and hardcore, because like that would be to me just a phenomenal, and there would be in my eyes no better person than you to curate something like that, because I think something like that should be documented. You know what I mean? Like there should be like this is Philly punk hardcore,
Right. I know one thing that made me really happy is I know an A&R guy from out in California, and he came and visited my husband and I, and he told me that by my putting this book out, that it brought a lot of interest to the Philly bands. And oh my God, that made me so happy, because Philly bands never got their due. Most of them didn't do huge tours or anything like that. We didn't have any money. We didn't have a band, we didn't have those things. So it really made me happy to see that it brought some attention to Philadelphia and its scene and its bands. And so that made me just thrilled.
Yeah, I'm gonna, completely own up to my ignorance. Like, DC punk and hardcore and New York punk and hardcore is something I've always, been engulfed in. But I didn't even realize like kind of the wealth of the scene that was here until, like the A&R guy said, until you kind of
that's awesome.
Put a light on it.
That really makes me happy, because those bands are very very deserving. And the people in those bands were amazing human beings and really great. And they came out for the book event. And, we're doing another book event. I told you about that at the Pyramid Club on November 18th. If I don't know when this is coming out, but if anybody's around, go onto my Instagram or my Facebook and come out for that night, because the idea of all of us punks being in this unbelievably fancy schmancy place in Philadelphia is just hysterical to me. And so I'm really, really looking and it was somebody from the Vintage Philadelphia page who made this happen. They do she's a member of the Pyramid Club and does an author series and contacted me, and I was just like, oh, I am so down with this. I will be there.
That's incredible. Man, it really,
looking forward to it.
That group really was a wealth of
You have no idea. I met so many cool people through that group. I'm really grateful. Even I don't know if you saw my post about the Midtown Diner.
Yes,
Was a place that we used to go. The daughter of the owner contacted me, and we're Facebook friends now. So
that's incredible.
it's really cool.
It's incredible. I will say this, and this is no slight. I try to stay out of the comments because, especially whenever the words Frank Rizzo appear, I know I'm about to see the most horrible things I've ever read in my life.
Yes, please, and I've jumped into a few of those with much regret. People are crazy, and I can post the most innocuous things, and someone will take it to Frank Rizzo, and I'm like, come on, you guys. This is, ridiculous. When if I write anything about like something that happened with a cop or whatever, people are like, when Frank Rizzo was, and I was like, yes, it was a great time if you were not gay or a person of color,
Right. Exactly.
But please,
It's and to that point, one of the things that I think you handle very well and is incredible is the reevaluation of Bad Brains after HR started kind of,
Yeah, the whole band really kind of went that way. And it was, for me, it was the first time I ever had to deal with something like that, where here was this band that I loved so much doing things that I hated so much. And I really, kind of had to make a decision with what I was going to do. And it was really difficult for me to navigate those waters for the very first time. And in a lot of ways, I feel I was kind of lucky because the band's trajectory kind of went down at the same time. But because I love that band. And I'm telling you, if you ever saw that band live, the first time I saw them at the Elks Center in Philadelphia, I was like, I will go see this band wherever they play in a tri-state area region. And that's a promise I kept. I would go see them in Trenton, New Jersey on a Tuesday night if they were playing, or in Asbury Park on a Wednesday if they were playing. That's how great they were. They always brought it. They were always incredible. And, so yeah, it was a really tough situation to have to wade through at the time.
Sure. And it takes an enormous amount of maturity to kind of make that decision. Like that's, the idea, especially nowadays when, I feel like I try not to idolize anybody because it seems like every other day it's like, well, you like them, but did you hear? And it's like, oh no, like,
right. I'm with you on that. Yeah. It's very hard. Yeah.
But the one other thing that I want to mention before, and then we'll jump into the Jauntlet and stuff like that. But the one other thing I want to mention that I thought was incredible was your reevaluation of where Sister Alice was coming from in the kind of idea of early onset dementia, because just to catch the readers up, you had a nun as a teacher who was, a horrible person. Not a horrible person. I don't want to put that on her, but like yeah, and the ability to kind of look back and recognize that. Were you able to do that at the time, or is that something? No. Yeah, no, I didn't.
No. And it was so frustrating because you just wanted somebody to step in and do anything. And I remember there was one girl in my class whose mother came down and, kind of said something. But back then, if I would have gone home and said, Mom, like this happened and then none did this, or, to my dad, they'd be like, well, I'm sure you deserved it, So there was really no questioning of authority of that. At that time, they sort of held all the, all the coins, and there was really nothing that we could do about it. But it kind of upset me that no one else stepped in and said, this is a bad situation. And these kids aren't learning, the bottom, she would teach the same lessons over and over again. And, we were supposed to have art every Friday and music, and we never had, maybe once or twice, we had it. And I was like, why aren't we having art? Why aren't we having music? And so, but definitely now when I look back with the repetition and the things that she did, it was definitely all, Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia that was, but when I also look back, I think that, some of those teachers that were cruel or whatever, they made me, when you look at teachers, there's usually two kinds of teachers, those that were inspired by a great teacher, or those that wanted to change their experience and kind of be the anti-teacher of what they experienced. And that's the kind that I am. And so I come across that a lot where I talk to different teachers and they'll be like, oh, I had this great English teacher and I wanted to be like him, or they say, oh, I had terrible teachers. So I said, when I get to be a teacher, I'm going to, and that's the category I'm in.
Yeah, that's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, you want to go through the Jauntlet, my special questionnaire here?
Sure.
All right, we start off with the one-hit wonders. First one, Billy Joel or Elton John?
Elton John.
Yeah. Were you ever a Billy Joel person, or?
I remember that song, Just the Way You Are, came out when I was in high school, and my dad liked it, which was really kind of weird. And that was a great song. And, and I liked it. And I think I appreciated Billy's talent and stuff. I wasn't a huge Elton John fan when I was growing up. Lots of times people were like, you either liked Elton John or you liked Bowie. They would pit them against each other for some reason, and I was a Bowie fan. So I liked Goodbye Yellow Brick Road a lot, but I don't think I ever even owned an Elton John record. So.
Okay. All right. Next one. And this is the one I've been dying to ask you. Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Yeah. See, now you put me in a really, really, really tough position. And that's really hard. And I'm going to go with Debbie Harry for a lot of different reasons. Just because I wanted to be Debbie Harry when I was a kid. I really kind of identified with her style and her look. And she opened a lot of doors for me. She was kind of fearless, and probably played at a little higher level than Joan was playing at the time. But I was, you read my book, I was a huge Joan Jett fan too, and liked her guitarist very much at the time. So that's a hard one. If I had to choose, if you're going to push me, I will probably go with Debbie, but I do love them both an enormous amount.
Absolutely. I just, right before the pandemic, saw Blondie also at the Exponential Music Festival. We go every year. But they still sound familiar, fantastic.
Great. Yeah. They played on a Monday night here, or else I would have gone, but I couldn't do a Monday night.
Monday nights are tough, especially since you said you wake up 4 o'clock, something like that?
4:45.
Oof.
Yeah. It's a tough one. Yeah.
That is a tough one.
Yeah.
Next one, Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
I'm going to go with Tina Turner only because I took my students to see the Tina musical last Thursday night. And
nice.
None of my kids knew who Tina Turner was, of course, but after that show, they sure did. And they were all Googling her and, just really excited about it. So I'm going to go with, they're both great. And it's another one that you can't really pick. But just because that's so fresh in my mind, seeing her story on stage, that's a great, and that's coming to Philadelphia, I think in November. If you get a chance to see that show, you should. It's really, really exciting and fun show to see.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I'm a big fan, and I'm also a musical theater guy. So that's right in my wheelhouse. Right in my wheelhouse. Next one, Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
See, now that's another hard one. I'm a huge Nirvana fan, and I was lucky enough to see them. But Jeff Ament, who's in Pearl Jam, has been he actually wanted to be in SSD Control at one point and called my husband to when they right around the breakup time to play bass. And, my husband was like, it didn't happen. Lucky for Jeff. But Jeff has been really nice to my husband and me, and has gotten us tickets for Pearl Jam shows. And my husband suffers from a really bad back. He's had 8 spinal surgeries. And Jeff sent us one of those massage guns and stuff. So again, you put me in too tough of a position.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. 100% fair. Next one, Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Well, it's got to be Stevie for that one. I am a huge Stevie fan. I love Janis as well. But it's so funny. There was a time in my life where people used to say I looked like Stevie Nicks. I would get stopped on, the later Stevie Nicks, like this more recent, within the past 20 years, Stevie Nicks kind of thing. And one time I had a picture of, she played with Rod Stewart at the Boston Garden, and I cut it out and put it on my door, and my kids would come in and be like, Miss, what are you doing with this guy on stage? So it's kind of funny, but I've always loved Stevie and her resilience and her strength and her songwriting abilities. And of course, she's been around much longer than, we lost Janis at 27. So her, just on sheer career longevity, I have to go with Stevie.
Excellent choice. Excellent choice. Here's one I think I know the answer to, but I'm not going to guess for you. The big one, Beatles or the Stones?
Stones, easily. Yeah. Yeah. I was never a huge, I remember we used to have, we had some 45s, I Want to Hold Your Hand and stuff like that, but I really loved the Stones, and I still love the Stones. So I'm going to go with them.
Yeah, it was a late in life decision for me, but I've finally tapped over into the Stones being my favorite of the two. Like the way I say it, and again, everybody who listens to this podcast will start repeating ad nauseum what I'm about to say, but that is that the Beatles were, like, to me, three geniuses that kind of work together at like a day job, whereas like the Stones to me are just the best band. Like they're just an incredible band.
Yeah. And I still listen to their stuff. Just the other day, I was like, I want to watch that video for Waiting on a Friend. That video is so awesome. I just love that video. And I was just, sitting up and watching it on my phone and just saying, wow, what a great song that is.
You know what my favorite video of the Stones is to go back and visit? And it's the Far Away Eyes video.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
It's so bizarre, and I love it so much.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, they're just a great band.
Before we tackle the last one of the top, or the one hit wonders, I'm going to throw one in just because I have to, and it's purely based on locale. But Eagles or the Patriots?
Oh, what do you want to get me killed? I'm not even going to go there. I just, I'm going to tell you a funny story right now. So my nephew, who I was always pretty close to, and always got along really, really well with. He was the doctor, one of the doctors for the Eagles, the year they won the Super Bowl. And, huge Eagles fan. My mother was a huge, huge, huge Eagles fan. And so I would always, I will say I will pick the Eagles over Philadelphia, just because, that's where I grew up, and that's embedded in me. But my nephew was, having a baby. And so I'm the English teacher aunt, right? So I said, well, I'm going to send you books for the baby, so that, I'll send like one every month or so. And by the time the baby's born, you'll have a little library, So I sent him some Dr. Seuss books, and I sent him, and I talked to a friend who had just had a baby, a Boston person. And I said, what books are good? And he said, well, I love Good Night Moon. But he said, there's one called Good Night Boston, and your nephew's come up and visited you in Boston a few times, he probably likes Boston. Why don't you send him Good Night Boston? I said, okay. So I just, click a button and send it from Amazon. I got the worst text messages in my life. What is this Tom Brady BS? Patriots crap, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I thought he was joking, but he was like dead serious. He was really angry. And I hadn't looked at the book. I thought it was going to be like, Boston Tea Party, Boston Common, just historical stuff. But there were 3 pages in it with the Patriots, the Bruins, the Celtics, and the Red Sox, just 3 pages. Oh my God. It almost destroyed our relationship. We didn't speak for like 6 months.
Yeah, that'll ruin it. That'll end a family right there.
Yeah. So like, I will say that, I always liked the Patriots, because they're hard workers and they worked really well as a team. And, I kind of lost touch with the Eagles after I moved here, because in the times when the games weren't on TV all the time. And so, but I always wanted them to win for my mother, and there was a time like my mother and my husband would talk endlessly about sports, and they would go back into the 60s with the Eagles and the Patriots. Like I'd just be sitting there like, oh God, please, you're boring me to tears. And when the first Super Bowl with the Eagles and the Patriots, they were going to go, but it was in Jacksonville, and the pricing was just ridiculous and they couldn't pull it off. But they were going to go together as mother-in-law and son-in-law, which would have been so cool. But they couldn't pull that off. So it's a shame.
No, that's incredible. That's incredible. The last one of the one-hit wonders, Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
I'm going to go with Bohemian Rhapsody. I was a big Queen fan. You know that. I never got to see Zeppelin. I had tickets, and then Robert Plant's son died. Stairway to Heaven's like a part of the huge fabric of my life growing up in high school and stuff. But Bohemian Rhapsody, man, you can't. That's just a genius song.
It's just a masterpiece. It really is.
It really is.
So the next and final section is the top 10 countdown. In this, as I'm sure you're aware, you can use Jawn to be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be music. Number one, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with when you were younger?
The first thing that I was obsessed with was, my record player and music. And I remember that my dad loved Roger Miller's King of the Road. Do you know that song?
I do.
You do? That's awesome that you do. And I remember, kind of told a story, and it created an atmosphere. And I think that I kind of realized, music can take you places that you don't know about. And so I'm going to go with music and record players and jukeboxes, and Roger Miller's King of the Road is my first Jawn. Beautiful answer.
Number two, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
So, I don't really go out of the 90s. I go from, the 60s, 70s and 80s, and then I stop at the 90s, and I don't really go out of that. And so what I'm listening to now when I'm at school every day is Rage Against the Machine, because I just saw them not too long ago, and I just think they're a brilliant band, and I love them.
Very nice. I'm going to share this with you. I don't know that I've shared this on the podcast, but one time I was I'm a guitar player, and I was in Guitar Center just looking at guitars, and some guy and his kid came up to me and they were like, you don't have to admit it, but are you Tom Morello? And I
can see that. I can totally see that.
And
you
this guy
really do look like him. I thought about that the whole time we've been on here.
And this guy would not take no for an answer. Like he was like, so I still kind of think. And I was like, I promise you I am not.
That's so funny.
It's hilarious. Number three, what was your first concert?
My first concert was Rod Stewart and Face's last concert, 1975 at the Civic Center in Philadelphia. I was 15 years old, and wow, I was like, I'm so into live music after this. And that was really, I went with, my boyfriend was a senior. I was a sophomore in high school. And that really just set off my concert going career.
Very cool. Very cool. I think you just answered this, but number four, what was your last concert?
So my last concert was just crazy. So I have a friend named Joe Nelson who is working with my husband to put his first two records out. And I saw on Facebook, somebody said, thanks, Joe Nelson, for hooking me up with Rage Against the Machine tickets in Washington, D.C. And so I commented and said, Joe Nelson better hook me up when they play Boston. But they weren't playing Boston. And so Joe private messaged me and he said, look, if you want to go see them at Madison Square Garden, I can make it happen. And it was like 4 days before the show. Now, when I do anything now at this age, I need a long runway, like weeks, months of planning, like months. But I was like, I've got to go. I never saw them, and I love them, and I have to do this. And so I called my niece, who's 30, and I was like, and she lives in Maryland. And I was like, you want to meet in New York and go see Rage Against the Machine? And she said, hell yeah. And so we did. And we went, and I'm telling you, we had the best time. We had the most incredible seats. It was the best night. Everything went perfectly. When we left Madison Square Gardens, we walked 4 blocks to the hotel, which is like, no ride home, nothing. And they were so good. And they were so good despite the fact that Zach is injured and he had to sit down the whole time. I was like, I can't even imagine the level of energy this band would put forth if he was not injured. Like, it was already busting through the roof, and I had former students that were there, and it was the best time. So that's my you never get any short answers with me.
That's good.
Story. It's always a story.
You're a podcaster's dream. Number 5, and this is another one I've been dying to ask. What was your favorite concert? What's the best live show you ever saw?
So I'm going with that Minor Threat, SSD Control, Agnostic Front, Crib Death, Flag of Democracy show at Buff Hall. Even though it was crazy and dangerous, every band played their guts out. I think the fear that was out there that night added to the energy, and every band brought their A game, and it was just spectacular. And I'm really excited that video exists of that show, because no one would ever believe it unless you watch that video, and that I'm not telling any lies when I say that is an incredible, incredible show.
Is that up on like YouTube or anything?
Yeah,
like
it's
that?
on YouTube. Yeah, you can search up. They only videotaped, was my friend Steve I. He only videotaped SSD and Minor Threat. But you can type in Minor Threat Buff Hall, it'll come up, or SSD Control Buff Hall, and it'll come up. And you can still feel the energy in the room. It's unbelievable. Ian had been hit by a car, big lump on his head. His calf was severely injured, but man, they played their guts out. That's
incredible. I love it. Number 6, another one that I've been dying to ask. Who have you never seen live that you wish you would have?
Yeah, a band that I still listen to a lot, Stiff Little Fingers. I never saw them in their heyday, and I really wish that I did. I don't know if they didn't come around or if I missed them. I don't know, but I never saw them, and I still listen to their Hanks album a lot, which is a live album, and I think that they're great.
Excellent answer. Number 7, name an unappreciated, Jawn. Name something you wish had more shine to it.
I would go back to those British bands that I told you about, like Crisis and Flux of Pink Indians. And again, they may have been, hugely appreciated in their home country, but here, they didn't, as far as I know, they didn't tour US or anything like that. And so, I would have to probably go with them.
It's the other thing that really amazes me, especially about the punk scene and the hardcore scene, is just how things got around without the internet. It's really amazing, because now, like, now if a band doesn't tour, a lot of the bands don't tour, but their music, you throw it up on SoundCloud or Bandcamp and it's everywhere,
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
It's incredible. Number 8, do you have a favorite album?
I have to say that Bad Brains Roar cassette is probably my favorite. I probably had to own 10 of those because I wore them out. I love that record, and it just goes, every single song on it is great. I still listen to it. It's just a really, really perfect record to me.
Awesome. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they put out.
That's probably Bowie. I will always listen to everything Bowie. Patti Smith, Blondie would also be in that category as well.
I haven't listened to it yet, but did you see the Blondie box set that just came out? That's got
that sounds like a Christmas present for me.
There it is. It's got outtakes and stuff, and I've heard like some early demos from it, and it seems absolutely incredible.
that sounds like something that I would love.
And the 10th and final of the top 10 countdown. What is your favorite Jawn of all time?
It's probably hard to pin down one Jawn of all time. And I thought about this ahead of time, and I'm going to just have to say that the series of events that brought me to pick up that Kids Will Have Their Say record, call my husband on the phone to do a show in Philadelphia, and end up being together for 40 years, so for good, for bad, for better, for worse, punk rock, brought me the love of my life. And so that's pretty cool, I think.
That's absolutely beautiful. Here's just a quick kind of touch question on that. Do you think the teaching career would have happened without the move to Boston?
Yeah, that's a question that I've actually asked myself many, many times. I think when I was, learning, coming up in Philadelphia, I realized how incredibly ignorant of the world I was. I knew nothing about politics or government or anything. So I do believe I probably would have gone back to school and done something, but I don't know if I would have gone into teaching. When my husband, in 1985, I was 25, my husband went back to school to be a mechanical engineer. And so I said, well, I'm going to go back to school too. And I just started taking classes in sociology and psychology. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to pursue this teaching career, and so I did. So I, honest to God, do not know if I would have, gone maybe into the music business, like, being a promoter, an A&R person or something like that. It's really, really hard to say, but it is something that I think about all the time. Like, what would I have done if I still lived in Philly?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So, you've got the book event coming up November 18th. You said, right?
Yes, November 18th. Yeah.
Tickets still available for anybody?
Yes, tickets are still available, and the way they do it, if you get your ticket before October 18th, it's $25, but that includes food and wine and stuff. And then if it's after October, then it goes up, and then like the day of the show, it's a little bit more, but there's already 60 people signed up. So they moved us into the big room, which I'm excited about because of COVID and stuff. So we're going to be in the, big fancy room. And I'm just psyched to come back to Philly. I will just look for any excuse to come back to to that city and see all these people that I love. And there's a lot of people that are, that are coming out, and a few that I didn't get to see at the church book event that I did. So like Timmy Tanzania, who was the doorman at the Hot Club, he's coming to this one, and I'm really excited to see him. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun in that crazy space, and I hope it's a nice, beautiful, clear night and we can see all over the city.
That's absolutely beautiful. If these fine folks want to follow you on the social media, how can they track you down?
Yeah, so they can request me on Nancy Barile, just my name, Barile. I had to lock down my accounts. I got a little bit of doxing going on when I put out. Yeah, my school was they were looking for science teachers, and I put out on Facebook that we were looking for 2 science teachers, and that there was a grant for people of color that it would give them a signing bonus and help with their graduate school. And some white people got very angry about that, even though the grant came from our governor of Massachusetts and not out of my pocket. Jesus. And so I started receiving all kinds of hate mail and death threats and stuff. And so I had to lock down my accounts for a little while. It's crazy. The internet, as much as I love it for the interconnectivity and keeping in touch and learning new things, and it certainly helped me sell my book, it can also be a real cesspool and really demoralizing and sad in a lot of ways too. So so just request me and I'll accept. I'll figure out you're a Philly person and you'll be in.
So that we live in a really weird time, don't we?
We do.
It's so weird. The things that people get upset about, and I know that like everybody's just struggling, and that's really all it is. It's like, I had Mariah Parker, who is a musician who performs under lingua franca, and they're also were a council person in Athens, Georgia. But we were talking about like just how scary the internet is of like just people like the empty threat. You don't know if it's an empty threat,
Right,
you know,
right.
and like it's just it's so disheartening. But they were very, very positive about the future, and I gotta say, you know, with someone like yourself teaching the youth of the future, I hope we're in good hands.
My kids give me hope every day. They are really, I teach them really wonderful, spectacular, caring, loving, smart, ambitious, you know, activist kids. And they're really great. And so they do give me hope for the future. Otherwise, I probably would jump in this ocean out back, you know.
That's incredible. Well, Nancy, thank you so much, not just for having this conversation with me, but for everything you do and for just an incredible book. And guys, if you are a reader, or even if you aren't, jump on Amazon and check out Nancy's book. Like, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's an incredible story, and especially if you're in this area, you're gonna absolutely never put it down.
And then come out on November 18th. I can get to meet you in person. It'd be so fun.
My thanks again to Nancy for joining me on the show today. Nancy will be doing a Meet the Author event on November 18th at the Pyramid Club in Philadelphia. You can find tickets and info at www.meettheauthorpc.com. Her book, I'm Not Holding Your Coat, My Bruises and All Memoir of Punk Rock Rebellion, is available at www.bazillionpoints.com. And Nancy can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nancy Barile. Links to all of those, as always, will appear in the show notes. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. And I know I say it every week, but it is never too late to get yourself a super awesome Jawn Scout Merit Badge for Citizenship of the World just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com for articles, merchandise, and links to all of the previous episodes of this podcast. And guys, while you're there, be sure to sign up for our mailing list to get all of the updates delivered straight to your inbox. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/YoThat'sMyJawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Yo That's My Jawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out, and touch some Jawn. All right, that's it. Thanks again for joining us for yet another show. I will catch you next time. Blue skies. Until next time, everybody.
Hey yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Your taste in music doesn't have to be.
Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production, written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by Phil Tyler Music featuring Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Natalie Runkle, and the incredibly brilliant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share, or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com. Or you can leave an audio message for us and possibly hear yourself on a future episode by visiting anchor.fm/YTMJ/message. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure and shout to the world, Yo, that's my Jawn.